Hi, everybody. We are live now. We're going to give everybody a moment to get their notifications and jump in. Uh, my name is Matt Hill, and this is
Lance Skymig, National Parks at Night.
awesome. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to grab the link and share it with some other people right now. And there it goes. Today, we are talking about the history of night photography and one particular special moment in the history of night photography. Lance, where's this information from? Where do they come from? What are we talking about? Who are these people?
Well, unfortunately, these people aren't with us anymore. We're talking about Carlos and Miguel Vargas, two brothers from Arequipa, Peru, who had a thriving portrait studio in Arequipa in the teens and 20s. But their real passion was night photography, and they were pioneers in night photography in a couple of different ways. They did some really interesting work that was somewhat in a vacuum, not being in the North America or Europe where most of the photography activity was happening at the time. So they really did some groundbreaking work with lighting and with staged photographs. And I came across them back in about 10 years ago or so. I was introduced to this fellow, Peter Yen, in Houston, who has basically the one who's worked with the ancestors of the Vargas brothers and done a lot of research down there in Peru, and has actually been the one who cleaned and scanned all of their 5x7 glass plates. So I was in San Antonio doing a workshop, and I met Peter, and he showed me some of their work, and I was just absolutely blown away, but mostly just because it was they were doing stuff 20, 30 years before I realized anyone else had been doing the sophisticated kind of lighting that they did. And
So when was this? Around what time?
They started their nocturnes, I think in 1920, 1921,
Wow.
and produced this big body of, there are about 75 glass plates that were salvaged and still in existence.
Amazing glass plates. How insensitive was the emulsion on a glass plate?
Well, they were dry plates, and they were working mostly in urban areas and with moonlight. So they had relatively decent sensitivity. They were probably, doing maybe up to half-hour exposures. And that's one of the things that they did that was so new and unique, was they were the first ones to use added lighting combined with moonlight.
Oh.
Other photographers going all the way back to 1860s, Nadar and Charles Piazzi Smith, had used artificial lighting by burning strips of magnesium wire to use as a light source. Both Nadar was working in the sewers of Paris when they discovered the catacombs, and Charles Piazzi Smith, an English photographer, was documenting the archaeological expedition of the Great Pyramids of Giza using that same technique. So imagine being underground or in a small chamber inside one of the pyramids and burning this strip of magnesium, and smoke and sparks are going off all over the place. Yeah. But it was because they had no other light source. They're in absolute total darkness.
Absolutely. You got to do what you got to do.
Right. And then later, around the turn of the century, photographers like Hine used flash to light the scene in front of him. There's just standard flash powder. You remember seeing in old movies, you see the photographer holding up this stick over his head with a little tray.
Yeah, he comes out from underneath.
Yeah.
Holds it up. Yeah.
Lights a little spark in this. Yeah. That's magnesium flash powder. And it's just the same stuff that they were burning wires, except it was in a powder form, and it ignited. And anyway, Hine used that to photograph newsboys and messengers. He was doing a documentary project trying to end child labor in the United States at the turn of the century. again, though, the lighting was just out of necessity. It wasn't really taking aesthetic considerations into hand, and it was just a flash exposure that it was over, just like we would do with a point and shoot camera, push the button, pop the flash, and that's it. But what the Vargas brothers did was they combined for the first time long exposures up to half an hour long in moonlight with added light.
I can't wait. I need to see this. Can we show them?
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right, let's bring this up. So this is from our blog, and here's this first image.
Yeah, and to me, this is one of their absolute best images. It's just wonderful in so many ways. So let's break it down and look at what's going on here. There's this bridge in the foreground. There's a guy standing underneath of it on the right-hand side. There's somebody sitting underneath of it and toward slightly behind it. And then there's a group of people in the background. And if you look carefully, you can see there's also 4 guys sitting up on top of the bridge.
Oh my God, I missed that until now.
Yeah. And look behind those guys. What do you see of the sky there?
Star trails.
Yeah, big long star trails.
Oh my gosh.
So the light source, where's the light coming from? So there's light off to the left that's lighting the underside of the bridge. It's lighting the 2 figures in the foreground. And then there's this other group in the background that has a backlight, some other light source behind them. And then the guys on the on top of the bridge were sitting there in darkness with, not moving for 20, 30 minutes, however long that exposure was because of the star trails. So you've got them. Almost any other photographer of the time or even later would have had that flash powder, assuming that they're probably using flash powder, at the camera position, front lighting, so you'd light the front of the bridge. You wouldn't get that amazing light underneath on the underside. You certainly wouldn't have the backlighting there. I just think this is really very sophisticated for the time. And another thing that this brings up is that they have staged this. This is not a found scene. There's no way that they could have created this on the spot if, these guys were just hanging around there. It's a directorial thing, like modern day or an early day Gregory Crutzen.
Oh, Greg. Yeah. Wow.
So they're using lighting in a more sophisticated way than anybody had before at night. They're combining that added light with long exposures, and they're staging complex scenes. And that's stuff that nobody had done any of those things in the teens and 20s. And certainly nobody had put them together. Before I saw this work, I thought of Bill Brandt's early light painting and night photographs of London in the 30s. They were great, but most of that light was just out of necessity from the camera position.
Right.
He also staged photographs. Interestingly, Bill Brandt recreated some of Bresai's famous photographs from Paris a few years earlier, even using his wife to pose as what had been a prostitute in Bresai's photograph. So
an interesting choice.
Yeah, I'm sure she thought so, right?
So are these the brothers right here? Is this image of the brothers?
Yeah, the second one in the post there. Yep. Yeah. That is their own studio self-portrait.
That's beautiful.
So
it looks like a long exposure portrait.
Yeah. Probably hot lights, right?
Yeah.
So their day-to-day business was a portrait studio, but they were not doing school portraits and soccer teams. They photographed the intelligentsia and the bohemian society. We may not think of Arequipa, Peru as a cosmopolitan metropolis, but back in this day, it was one of the big cultural centers of South America, and they were at the forefront of it in the scene. So, think of Paris in the 1930s with,
right.
Henry Miller and Bresai and Man Ray and all the stuff that was going on there at that time. They were kind of the same thing to Arequipa and to South America.
Right.
So,
wow.
So that,
good looking lads too.
yeah.
Wow. So
So
let's
yeah,
talk about this one.
yeah. It's uh, the Andean mountains in the background. You can tell, obviously, this is a moonlit exposure. They're using the backlighting again on the underside of the bridge, and probably a different light source. Maybe, maybe not backlighting the car there.
Mm,
But, and this is, you can tell it's around 1920 or early 1920s based on that image there. So um, it's a shame that Peter wasn't able to save more of their work. I'm not sure how many night images there were altogether, but when he finally met up with the ancestor of the Vargas brothers and went out into the barn where they found the boxes of these glass plates, wooden crates of glass plates in a barn from, the 30s probably until 1995 or so.
I
It's
can't imagine.
amazing. It's amazing that he was able to save as many of them as he did.
I can't
Really
imagine.
pretty phenomenal.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I know people have trouble focusing now. Do you think they had trouble focusing?
Well, I'm pretty sure they used hyperfocal focusing on their view cameras, because that was the standard method of focus for view camera photographers for many years. We struggle with it now, but it's a technique that's been used for a long time. But good question. Yeah, focusing by moonlight on an f8 lens. Good luck with that.
Impossible.
Yeah,
Impossible. Now this image has got to be my favorite from the series.
yeah. Again, look at the quality of the lighting there. That's really what makes their work so special. They're storytellers, right?
Yeah, they certainly are. They're not just capturing. They're crafting.
Yeah, they absolutely are. You know, and I love the way that they leave it up to us to decide, what this is, what's going on, what's happening inside there. But it's something interesting. And I love the way that, they had these salons in their studio where they would have people come and have parties and so forth, and they all, I'm sure, get all liquored up, and one of them would have an idea, hey, let's go out and make a photograph. And they'd take 20 people out into the street and do something like this.
Oh, that's so cool.
Such a cool time and place. Absolutely.
That is so cool. Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
You can see they like bridges and they like backlighting, but who doesn't like backlighting? It's effective, right?
I love water and I love sky. I mean, I get it.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that, the two guys facing opposite directions too. That's just so cool, and hopefully you can see it. The guy on top of the bridge is facing to the right, and the guy underneath the bridge is facing to the left, and they're both just standing there looking in opposite directions. Very, very surreal. This is kind of the, beginning of the surrealism movement. And, no doubt they were aware of what was happening in France and in Spain at the time. Although in Europe, they were probably less aware of what these guys were doing.
It's funny. I just saw a comment. Klaus said this reminds him of natural bridges. Me too. Is this Sipapu?
Yeah. Oh. No, Arequipa.
Right. Oh my gosh. So this is amazing. Tell me again how you met Peter.
I was in San Antonio. Scott Martin and I were doing a workshop for the Texas Photographic Society, and he somehow we went to meet his friend Peter Yen, and he's a administrator for the Houston Symphony and a photo historian.
Wow.
And in particular, his specialty is early South American and Latin American photography. He's been to Peru, many times, doing the research on Vargas brothers and other early Latin American photographers. The Vargas brothers' work was shown at Houston Photo Fest in 1997. That was the first time they were presented to the world, so to speak. And there've been a few other exhibits. There's been a book of their work that they did get published in Spanish. It has not been published in English, and I hope someday that it will be, because they've really made a major contribution to night photography and to photography in general, and also to Latin American photography. So
I have to say thank you to both you and Peter for the care that you put into bringing this to light, pun fully intended, because I love knowing about where our night photography habits come from and who inspired us, whether directly or indirectly. And it's the people that care that make a difference, and like you and like Peter. So thank you.
Of course. Well, my mentor, Steve Harper, when he taught night photography to me and many other students at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, he made sure to always include a lecture on the history of night photography in his classes. And it stuck with me. And it's something that I've done for many, many years in my own workshops. We've gotten out of it in NPAN, but it's still something that I'm really passionate about. And, I guess the example of that is, this blog post is not a standalone, right?
Right.
It's part of a series.
It is.
Yeah. So Muses from the Past is an ongoing series of blog posts exploring the work of early night photographers. And to date, we have focused on mostly the lesser known night photographers. But it's something that I guess if our content manager would allow it, I'd do one of these for every post, because it's just what I'm so passionate about. But we squeeze one in every couple of months.
Well, I know that you have plans, you have dreams, right? If you had your druthers and you could keep going, what more would you do with this history of night photography?
Well, there are just a few more of these lesser known people that I really want to, spread the word about, like the Vargas brothers, Harold Burdekin and John Morrison. We wrote about Volkmar Wenzel, the National Geographic darkroom technician who went out and photographed Washington at night in the 30s after being inspired by seeing a copy of Brisai's book. Jessie Tarbox Beals, the first woman and one of the few early women night photographers. But in addition, there's one whole huge project I haven't even touched on yet. Most people who know anything about history photography or early night photography would certainly know Brisai's work. The Eye of Paris, or as Picasso called him, the terrorist, for his use of his liberal use of magnesium flash powder. But so I haven't done any of the Bill Brandt. I haven't done Brisai yet. But O. Winston Link is a photographer whose work is just amazing. He's got an amazing life story. There's a lot of tragedy and a lot of sadness there, but created some really memorable images. And but that's only part of the story with Link. Most people have heard of O. Winston Link and seen if they don't know his name, they'd certainly recognize a few of his photographs. But there was a whole cadre of night train photographers in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So Jeff Bruce did, what's the name of his book? Starlight on the Rails.
Wow.
That's a collection of this mostly nighttime train photography by these guys. And oddly enough, due to the things that were going on in Link's life at the time that he created this book, he wasn't able to get permission to include Link's work in it. But anyway, so that's certainly something to explore, is the nighttime train photographers, for sure. And
cool.
I'm
gonna press pause for 1 second. For those of you that are watching live, there's a lot of chat going on. Thank you so much for joining us. I can see it out of the corner of my eye. At the end of this, we'll do a brief Q&A. So if you have questions that you want to ask Lance, please ask them now, because we're on about a 30-second delay, and we're going to get to them, and I'll scan through them. Please continue, Lance.
Yeah, absolutely. Also there are, the other the pictorialist night photographers. We'll certainly be digging deep into those guys. Stieglitz, one of the first American photographers to really dig deep into night photography. And he was clearly, massively influential among the pictorialists and early modernist photographers. Steichen being chief among them, but also Coburn and Paul Haviland and another whole group of people. I love doing research on this stuff. And one of the things that I came across in an early turn of the century American photographer magazine article, if you can believe that, there was an article by this fellow who was a reverend at a small rural parish in England, who founded the English Society of Night Photographers in 1908. A.H. Blake, not a photographer that anyone's ever heard about.
Wow.
But thanks to Google Books, it's been scanned and preserved, and definitely would like. There's a lot of, if you spend any time reading, photography magazines back when they were actually printed on paper, there's always always lots of back and forth banter, people talking about in different articles, techniques and theories, different ways of working. And this is true going back all the way back to the turn of the century. There was this rivalry between Europe and North America for conquering night photography around the turn of the century. So really what my ultimate goal is to write an academic text on the history of night photography.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
My first serious night photography book was yours.
All right.
It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was the first chapter?
Chapter 1. The history of night photography.
What do you know?
Hey.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. This is fabulous. I just want to say that scanning through all of the comments here, everybody here wants you to do more of this, including our content manager. So
excellent.
Chris says yes.
Okay.
So yeah. There's
right.
it's unconditional yes to more of this.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Oh, I just thought of one more. There are a lot of early photographers who had, one-hit wonders in the night photography department, if you will. Like Bernice Abbott, for example, not a one-hit wonder photographer, but a one-hit night photographer. Probably her best known image is New York at Night, 1943, a really striking black and white image from the top of a New York skyscraper. I'm not sure which building it was shot from, but Marion Pulse Wolcott, another woman photographer who had one phenomenal night shot in Weston, Vermont in a blizzard in I think the 50s.
Wow.
So
wow. And that reminds me of one of the very few things I've kept magazine wise. It was a New York Times magazine, and it was a whole bunch of photographers taking pictures at Times Square, I think before it became Disneyfied. And one photographer rented out a hotel room, blacked out the window and put a pinhole in there and faced the camera backwards and used the entire hotel room as a camera obscura.
Abelardo Morel, yes. Love his work.
Yeah.
I absolutely love his work.
That image has stuck with me for so long. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I have it right over there in my bookcase.
All right. Yeah. So
this was wonderful. I want to share a little bit more of the website since you mentioned it. Some people have trouble finding the search bar on our website. That's because it's always at the bottom. Sorry about that. That's where it is. If you type in Muses from the past, you will be able to find all of Lance's posts to date that include Muses from the past. And that can be, you can get to our website at npan.co/blog. There will be links in the description down below on YouTube. Easy to find. Yeah, there's all of that. I'm delighted. I'm honored. It's always fun to talk night photography with you, Lance. I learned something every single time.
Oh, well, thanks. This was fun. And yeah, I look forward to producing some more of these.
Man, we do too. Please hurry up. We want more. And to everybody who joined, let me just take a quick little thing. I don't see anything on here that's a question per se. Somebody wanted you to pronounce Alfred's name as Stieglitz because he's German.
Was that Klaus?
The Cold brothers. There's a lot of other people that people want to see in here, including Owl. So
yeah, actually, people put up your suggestions. If you've got night photographers, I'm always looking for new to me night photographers to include.
Yep. And leave them in the live chat, leave them in the comments after this is done being broadcast, leave them in the comments for the video. And we will receive those and send them on to Lance and make sure that he puts them in his queue.
Right on.
Most of all, thank you all for loving night photography as much as we do. We appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on YouTube. If you're just seeing this for the first time, please hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it so you get notifications when we go live like this. And thanks so much. Lance, you're a champ. Thanks for joining us.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. And we will see you next time.
All right, then.
All right.